200,000 years ago, in a cave high in the Lubombo Mountains near the border of what is now South Africa and Eswatini, someone made a bed. They cut armfuls of broad-leaved grass, the same kind that still grows on the slope outside the cave, and carried it in. They raked ash out of the fireplace and spread it across the floor first in a layer. Then they laid the grass on top of the ash, thick, close to a foot deep, and that is where they slept. It is the oldest bed anyone has ever found, and almost every choice in it was deliberate. Start with what sleeping looked like before that. For most of the history of the human line, night was spent off the ground. Apes still do it, and the routine is precise. In the last hour of daylight, a chimpanzee picks a tree, tests branches with its weight, bends the strong ones inward across each other, and treads them down into a bowl. Then it breaks off leafy twigs and lines the rim. The whole thing takes a few minutes, holds one body, and gets abandoned in the morning. A new one goes up in a different tree the next evening. Sleeping up there is not comfortable. It is safe. A leopard can climb, but it cannot cross the outer branches without shaking them, and a body sleeping in a fork wakes when the tree moves. Height also puts a sleeper above the animals that hunt by scent along the ground. Whole groups nested in the same stand of trees, spread across neighbouring crowns, close enough to hear each other and far enough apart that the branches held. Mothers slept with infants against their bodies, one arm around them, all night, because a sleeping baby in a tree has no other way to stay in the tree. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our future documentaries. Thank you for your support. Now let's continue. The problem was that the human body was changing in a direction that made climbing worse. Legs got longer, feet got flatter and stiffer, shoulders and arms lost the build that lets an ape hang and swing. The creature adapted for walking 20 miles a day across open ground is a poor climber, and every generation it got poorer. So the ground had to become survivable. That took fire. Around a fire, the sleeping arrangement changed completely. The group lay down in a rough ring with the coals in the middle, close enough to feel the heat, with the light and the smoke marking the edges of the camp. Bodies on the ground can lie flat, stretch out, and sleep deeply in a way that is impossible in a tree, where part of the brain has to keep the body from falling. Which brings the story back to the bed in the Lubombo Mountains. The grass was chosen. It was broad-leaved and soft, cut in quantity, and hauled a long way in armloads. The ash underneath was not an accident either. Fine powdered ash is a barrier that crawling insects cannot easily cross. It clogs the parts they breathe and bite with, and it dries them out. Ticks, mites, and fleas do not walk through it. And in the grass of the oldest bedding in that cave lie the burned remains of camphor bush, an aromatic plant still used in parts of Africa today to drive off mosquitoes. Some of it was burned, some of it laid on top, so the bed had 3 layers and 3 purposes. Ash against the crawlers, grass for softness and insulation from cold stone, aromatic leaves against everything that flies. When the bedding got dirty or infested or simply began to smell, they did not carry it out. They burned it where it lay and put down fresh grass on the new ash. Whole sequences of that cycle are stacked in the cave floor, one bed on the ashes of the last, over and over for tens of thousands of years. Sleeping was not the only thing that happened on those mats. Mixed into the grass are chips of stone from tool making and tiny rounded grains of red and orange ochre. People sat on the bedding to nap flint and to work with pigment. The bed was also the workshop and the sitting room, the way a rug in front of a fire has always been. The practice held for a very long time. 77,000 years ago, in a rock shelter closer to the coast in the same part of Africa, people were building beds out of sedge and laying aromatic leaves over the top, then burning the whole thing off when it wore out. In northern Spain, around 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals were making grass bedding in the back of a cave. Now, the night itself. Camps did not go quiet all at once. In foraging groups that still live this way, one of the most consistent findings is that everyone sleeps on a slightly different clock. The young stay up late, talking and moving around the fire. The old go down early and wake in the small hours, sometimes for good. The effect is that the camp is never entirely unconscious. In one group of 33 adults tracked continuously for 20 nights, there were only 18 minutes in the whole stretch when every single person was asleep at the same time. For more than 99% of every night somebody was awake. Nobody was assigned that job. It falls out of the ordinary spread of ages in a group, and it means a sleeping camp always has eyes on it. Sleep itself was shorter than most people assume. Groups living without electric light in warm climates tend to sleep somewhere between 6 and 7 hours, going down a few hours after sunset rather than at dark and waking before dawn. What drives the timing is not the light but the temperature. People fall asleep as the night cools and wake as it hits bottom, in the coldest part of the small hours just before the sun. Waking in the middle of the night was not a problem to be fixed. Someone stirred, put wood on the fire, listened, urinated at the edge of camp and went back down. That happened all night. In shifts nobody organised. What they listened to mattered. Sound carries a long way over open country at night, and a lion calling can be heard for 5 miles. So can hyenas. A camp full of people who had grown up outdoors could tell direction, rough distance, and species from a single call, and could tell the difference between an animal announcing itself from far off and one that had gone quiet because it was close. Silence was worse than noise. Children slept in the middle of everything. Infants stayed against a body all night, and small children slept between adults, inside the ring closest to the fire. In every group of people who still sleep this way, nobody sleeps alone, and a child sleeping apart from adults would be unthinkable rather than independent. Sleep also got taken during the day. In hot climates, the middle of the afternoon is unworkable, so people sat out the worst of the heat in shade, and a fair share of those afternoons included an hour of actual sleep. The night was never expected to carry the whole load. Cold was the constant enemy of a good night. A fire radiates heat in one direction only, so the side facing the coals warms and the other side does not, and people turned through the night to even it out. They slept against each other, which is the cheapest heat there is. Skins were pulled over and eventually cut and sewn into coverings. In Europe and Northern Asia the problem was on another scale. Winter nights there run 14 hours or longer and drop far below freezing, and a fire has to be fed all the way through them. Camps were set against rock walls that held the day's heat and blocked the wind, with the fire between the wall and the sleepers so the stone bounced the warmth back. Wood was stacked within arm's reach before dark, because getting up to gather fuel at 3 a.m. in deep cold is how people died. A camp without fire, without hides, and without bodies pressed together was simply a camp where somebody did not see the sun come up. The other constant was everything else that used the same shelters. Caves are not empty. Bears hibernate in them, and the deep chambers of European caves are floored with the bones of cave bears that died in their sleep over thousands of winters. Hyenas den in them and drag carcasses inside. Lions use the mouths. People almost always slept at the entrance or under an overhang, not deep inside. The mouth of a cave has light, ventilation for smoke, a view of the approach, and a single direction to defend. The dark interior has none of that, and something else may already be in it. Not every night happened in a good place. Groups on the move slept rough, in the open, with no bedding at all and whatever fire they could get going before dark. A night like that meant lying on bare ground, waking repeatedly and moving again at first light. The elaborate bed in the cave was what a group built when it intended to stay, and staying was the whole point of building it. And then there were the parasites, which never went away. Lice lived in hair and in the seams of clothing, and their evolutionary history tracks so closely with ours that the point when the clothing louse split off marks roughly when people started wearing clothes at all. Fleas came with any animal skin brought into camp. Ticks came up out of the grass. Bedbugs originally fed on bats in caves, and when people started sleeping in those same caves, some of them switched over and never left. This is what the ash under the grass was for. Somebody worked out, a very long time ago, what made the difference between a night of sleep and a night of being eaten alive by things too small to see clearly. Then, morning. The coldest point of the night comes right before sunrise, and that is when the camp stirred. Someone reached the fire first and worked it back up from the coals. People came off the bedding stiff because a foot of grass over stone is insulation, not a mattress. And lying on the ground all night leaves a body sore in ways a modern bed does not. And the day started immediately, because everything that had to happen before dark had to start early. There is one more thing worth saying about all of this, and it has nothing to do with comfort. Sleep is the most defenseless condition an animal ever enters voluntarily. Every night, every member of the group loses awareness of the world for hours at a stretch, surrounded by animals that hunt in exactly those hours. Every layer described here exists to buy back some of that vulnerability. The fire, the ring of bodies, the mouth of the cave instead of the depths, the staggered clocks that keep somebody awake, the ash under the grass, the burning of the old bedding. None of it is instinct. All of it had to be worked out, taught and repeated every single evening. The caves where those beds were built are the same caves where, tens of thousands of years later, people knelt with charcoal and ochre and drew on the walls. In some of them, the painted chambers sit a short walk past the sleeping floor. The people who made that art had spent every night of their lives on a bed of cut grass laid over ash, beside a fire someone had to keep alive, in a room they shared with the dark.